Fairly simple video today. This is an iPhone 7 and it's got a bad battery. We're going to swap it out. To begin, you want to make sure that the iPhone is powered off and the battery is discharged as much as possible so that if you do poke it, it's not going to have too big of an event. First step is to remove the two pentalobe screws on the bottom of the phone. I am trying a new camera setup today, so pardon me while I figure that out. And the next step is to remove the display. Now, depending on the condition of your phone, it may have better, stronger adhesive. I'm not sure on this one, so to begin, I'm just going to see if I can get it removed with a slight pull. No. So I'll be right back with a way to heat this up. One microwaving session later. Now that I've got the eye opener warmed up in the microwave, I'm actually able to use it to melt the adhesive for this iPhone. Once that's warmed up, the adhesive on each side, I'm just going to shift it, I'll be able to use the suction cup to remove the display from the iPhone. Now, when you remove the display from any iPhone, you have to be careful of the display connectors. Depending on the model, they can be in different positions. But for the iPhone 7, they're along the right-hand side of the phone, and you want to be careful not to tear them when you pry it open from the bottom. Now, when you go to pry open the phone, you only want to use plastic tools to avoid any sort of damage to the frame or display. If you use a metal tool, you could permanently damage the frame or the display and leave unpleasant marks that just don't look good and unprofessional, to be honest. And after a while, I'm going to have a go with a suction cup. And you can work at it with a plastic tool to try and create a larger gap. Once you've got a larger gap, you can start to work your way around with a spudger or a black stick, a plastic pick. Just get it in there and don't push it in too far, otherwise you may damage an antenna or a cable of some sort. Next, you're going to work that around the phone very gently to separate the adhesive. And then you can use the plastic pry tool to follow and make the gap a bit larger. Now, don't go too close to the top because that's where it's clipped in using a different set of clips. But you can work your way around each side of the phone. Being very careful not to hit these cables about here, and there are some further up. We're done with the suction cup, and we can actually start to see how the phone comes apart. You can see there is a bit of give in these cables here, so you can use that to your advantage to kind of pull down gently on the upper part of the display, and you can apply a bit of heat to relax the adhesive. That way it makes it easier to remove. And this should be the last of the adhesive before we're able to slide the phone, slide the display off the phone. And it will open to the right. Just like that. Now, the first thing that you'll want to do once you have the iPhone open like that is to remove the 4 screws covering the battery connector and display connector. That way you can remove the battery connector from the phone. It's important to always disconnect the battery in any device that you are currently working on to avoid any sort of damage to the device itself. Once inside, you'll need to remove the 4 Y000 screws from the lower bracket on the iPhone, and be sure to keep track of where they came from. That way you can reinstall them properly when you close the phone up. It's important to make sure that every screw goes back into the right position, otherwise, otherwise you could risk damaging the board. Now this little bracket may be stuck to the cables, and if it is, it will just be held on very lightly with a tiny bit of adhesive. You just need to apply a bit of force and it will come off. Just be careful not to tear the cables. Now the next step is to disconnect the battery, and then the two display cables over here. Once you remove the lower bracket, you can make your way up to the upper one, and be sure to change out for a Phillips 000 screwdriver instead of the Y000 that you were using previously. Now you can remove the bracket covering the front sensor assembly, and be sure to place it with the corresponding screws. Next up, you can disconnect the front sensors. And this can be a bit challenging because it's a bit tight with the camera, but once you've got that, you can separate the display from the body. I suggest removing all adhesive. That way, when you put the new seal on to keep the phone water resistant, there won't be any in the way. Next step, we're going to make our way towards the bottom of the phone. And we'll need to remove the Taptic engine to make the pull tabs on the battery more accessible. So that's just underneath the barometric vent. So there's two more screws for that. And then you can remove the barometric vent. 3 screws right there. And there's a little connector holding it in place that you'll need to disconnect. And disconnect the Taptic engine. Now you have complete access to the battery tabs. And what I like to do to remove these battery tabs is first remove the little ends, that way you have a better way to grab onto them. And you're not going to pull them out right away. First thing I do is pull it out a little bit, then start wrapping it around a black stick. That way I'm able to control it quite nicely. Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. You decided to go snap on me during a tutorial. That's actually, I've not had that before. Cool, okay. In the event that you have something like this happen, what you'll need to do is try out the other battery tabs first. See if you can get them to come out. And it seems like this one wants to come out a bit easier. So you want to make sure that you don't accidentally catch it on the battery when you go to remove it. But you just pull it out, twist it in, and keep tension on it to prevent it from accidentally sticking to anything else. This little wad of battery adhesive will be quite helpful for when we get this one out. So what I'm going to do, grab some tweezers. Now generally you want to avoid using metal tools near batteries, and that's what I always do, but down here this is the battery control board. Now if you still short anything, something could go horribly wrong, but as long as you're very careful, you should be able to reach in there and grab the remainder of the pull tab, as long as it's close enough to the beginning. Once you've got that, I'm not sure how well this will work, because part of the battery, the little adhesive cover that makes it look nicer, is actually sticking to it. But if you wiggle it enough, and keep enough tension, whoops, you should be able to remove it. And I'll show you the little tabs that it was catching on. You can see this little black cover for the battery. You can just recover that. But anyway, there you go. The battery has successfully been removed safely. Next step is you'll want to actually clean out the remaining adhesive from the display frame before you install your new battery. So I'm just going to use the battery adhesive and see if I can roll that along the edge. You want to make sure there's absolutely none of the old seal left over. And what I find can work well is if you use a cotton swab with some isopropyl alcohol. Just go over the little ridge that the seal rests on, and you should be able to get it off nicely. Once you've got all the adhesive removed, you're all set to install the battery. So this one I got from iFixit, and it came with the adhesive pre-installed. So what you'll need to do is remove the battery from its little protective sleeve, and then make sure that you have the adhesive attached firmly to the back, that way it doesn't peel off from the battery when you go to reinstall it. And if you're installing batteries, you want to start with the little tabs at the bottom and make sure they're aligned about the same way as this one, so that they come up to about there on the battery. And this will ensure that it's just easier to remove next time someone has to service the battery. Then you can position the battery in the iPhone. You want to make sure that the battery connector aligns, but don't connect it just yet. Once it's aligned, you can position it and push down on it lightly to ensure that it is in place properly. Next step is to reinstall everything that we took out to install the battery, so I'm going to get on to that right now. Also, while we're at it, I'm just going to clean out the lightning connector, because, well, it's important to make sure that you have a good connection when charging. As the phone is disconnected, I'm going to use this set of tweezers, and you can see cleaning out the lightning connector will remove a bit of dust, and you want to make sure that you don't use too sharp a tool, otherwise you could damage the plastic surround, or worse, the pins. So what you want to do is just kind of lightly scrape at any sort of dust or debris until you remove it from the port. Now that we've got all the dust and debris removed from the lightning port, next step is to kind of just do what we did in the first place, but in reverse. So I'm just going to reinstall the Taptic engine, and be very careful with the connector because it's pretty thin and fragile. And then we're going to reinstall the barometric vent. Be careful not to over-tighten your screws, otherwise you could risk stripping a screw and making it very difficult to remove. Also, you want to make sure that you don't put in a screw too loosely, otherwise it could fall out when someone is using the phone, which is never a good thing. You want to pay special attention with the screws for the Taptic engine, as this part does vibrate, and the vibrations could make any loose screw become looser. I've seen a few repaired iPhone 7s that have had missing Taptic engine screws just floating about in the phone. You never want a screw to come loose inside the phone because you could risk puncturing the battery with that screw. So we've got that reinstalled. You're not going to connect the battery yet at all. Next step is to move on to the display and kind of repeat the process of what we did with the body of the phone, just removing any sort of remaining adhesive from the frame. That way it's got a nice clean surface to attach to the new adhesive. Once all the adhesive has been removed, the next step is to go around it with some isopropyl alcohol. You want to be careful not to get it into the display, otherwise you could damage the backlight, so I suggest using a very light amount of isopropyl alcohol for this. You'll want to kind of dab it on to a paper towel or something to make sure there's not too much. Now, all we have to do is install the new water-resistant seal, and we should be good to go. Just peel it off. And make sure you align the part for the camera with the camera. This is why it's so important to make sure the old gasket has been removed, to make sure this guy has a good seal. Once you've got that in place, you'll need to run over the entire perimeter with a black stick to make sure it has good contact with the lip of the phone. Once you've ensured that it's been installed nicely, you can remove the upper part of the seal. Now, not all seals have this. The ones from iFixit I found do have it, and it's really quite handy because it allows you to reinstall the display and make sure that it has a good connection before you finally seal it up. So what I'll do now is reinstall the brackets for all the connectors to make sure they stay in place when the phone is sealed, and seal the phone up for the last time. So I'll just reinstall these brackets. Switch back to a Y000 head for the lower one. Once you reinstall the screws for the brackets, you should only have 2 screws remaining, and those should be the pentalobe screws for the bottom of the phone. One final test before I seal it up. Everything is working, which is great. So, all we need to do now is remove the protective plastic from the seal. And to close up the phone, what you'll need to do is put the top in at an angle first so that it hooks under the lip. Then push it down along the edges so that you hear those clicks. And make sure to firmly push along the edge of the phone so that the adhesive makes good contact with the frame and the display. Last step is to reinstall the 2 pentalobe screws on the bottom of the phone, and it will be all set. You want to be careful not to over tighten these because you could risk stripping them and make accessing the phone again pretty difficult. Now that we've got everything all set, the last step is battery calibration. Now that's where you drain the battery to 10%, then charge it up to 100%. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I suggest you do the same, and that's about everything. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was able to help you out, and now you've got a working iPhone 7 with a good battery in it. If you found this video helpful, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and if you want to see more regularly from me, I suggest you check out my Twitter. I've linked that in the description below. Also, I've linked the part from iFixit that I used and the guide for the iPhone 7. I really appreciate you guys. This video has been pretty fun to make, and they all have been, really, to be honest. So, anyway, thanks for watching, and have a great day.